We're all pushing for this green energy future, right? We want the electric cars, the wind turbines, all of it. But what if the real price of saving the planet on land is destroying our last totally untouched wilderness, the deep ocean? It's this massive, high-stakes trade-off that's right at the heart of the green revolution. So let's dive in and see what's really going on. At the very core of this whole debate is this really beautiful idea, one that's actually written into international law, that the deep seabed belongs to all of us. It's a common heritage of mankind. It's not supposed to be a free-for-all, but that ideal is being tested right now like never before. And here's why. Because while the sea might be a common heritage, it's also a massive, massive economic opportunity. We're talking about a projected market value for deep-sea mining that could hit nearly $15 billion by 2030. That kind of money puts incredible pressure on an ideal. It wants to turn that shared heritage into a commodity. So in this explainer, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the actual treasure everyone's hunting for on the ocean floor. Then, we'll get into the new global gold rush and who the major players are. We're going to examine the huge environmental stakes, try to untangle the web of who's making the rules, and finally, we'll ask a big question. Are there other options? Okay, so first up, what is this hidden treasure? We're talking about going thousands of meters down into the pitch black, freezing cold abyss, where there are mineral deposits that are way richer than a lot of what's left on land. Let's take a closer look at what has everyone so excited. The main target is something called a polymetallic nodule. And honestly, the best way to picture them is as metal-rich potatoes just sitting there on the seafloor, not attached to anything. But here's the wild part. Look at how slowly they grow. A few millimeters every million years. That just tells you once you pick them up, they are gone for good on any human timescale. And hey, it's not just about the nodules. As you can see here, there are also sulfide deposits that form around those crazy hydrothermal vents and cobalt-rich crusts that cover underwater mountains. But for right now, all the commercial focus is on the nodules. And why's that? Well, because you don't really have to dig or drill. The plan is basically to use a giant vacuum cleaner to just scoop them right up. So why go through all this trouble and expense? Well, the economic logic is pretty powerful. On land, we're having to dig up more and more rock to get less and less metal. The ore grades are often falling below 1%. But these nodules, they are incredibly concentrated. We're talking nearly 30% valuable metals in some cases. That's a game changer that makes the deep sea almost impossible for some companies to ignore. And this economic appeal has kicked off what a lot of people are calling a new global gold rush. It's being driven by everything from green tech and national security to just good old-fashioned competition between countries. So let's see who's leading the pack in this race to the bottom. This chart gives you a pretty clear snapshot of the geopolitical game board. China is a definite frontrunner, no question. They hold more exploration contracts with the International Seabed Authority, that's the ISA, than any other single nation. And this isn't just business. It's a strategic play to control the future supply of these critical minerals. And then you see the United States, with a big, fat zero. Why? Because the US never actually ratified the UN treaty that set up the ISA. So it's operating outside this whole international system, which has huge implications. And believe me, this race is heating up fast. Back in 2021, the tiny island nation of Nauru, working with a Canadian company, triggered this obscure clause called the 2-year rule. It basically put a clock on the ISA to finalize mining rules by July 2023. Well, they couldn't do it. That created a massive legal loophole that could let mining start without a full set of environmental rules. And then, in a huge move, the US just decided to go its own way, creating its own permitting process and completely sidestepping the international community. All of this speed and competition brings us to what is, without a doubt, the most critical part of this entire debate: the environmental cost. We're talking about putting heavy industrial machinery into the largest and least understood ecosystem on the entire planet. So what exactly is at risk here? I want you to just let this number sink in for a second. In the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, which is basically prime real estate for this kind of mining, scientists just recently found over 5,000 species that are completely new to science. It's a staggering reminder that we could be on the verge of destroying entire ecosystems we don't even know exist yet. Now, this slide really frames the central conflict perfectly. On one hand, you have the pro-mining argument, which says, hey, this is actually better for the climate. It produces way less CO2 than land-based mining. But on the other hand, you have environmental scientists warning that it could be catastrophically worse for biodiversity and that the ecosystems might never recover. It's a classic rock-and-a-hard-place scenario, but with the whole planet at stake. And beyond that big debate, there are some risks that scientists pretty much all agree on. The mining is going to kick up these huge clouds of sediment, plumes, that can drift for miles and just smother life on the seafloor. When you remove the nodules, you're literally taking away the only hard surface for animals to live on in these vast muddy plains. And the constant noise and light in a world that's supposed to be silent and dark, that's a massive disruption. And that's not even getting into the potential impact on the ocean's ability to store carbon. These are not small things. So with stakes this high, you have to wonder, who's in charge of making the rules? Well, this is where things get really, really complicated and, frankly, pretty deadlocked. The main organization is the International Seabed Authority, the ISA. The UN set it up to manage the common heritage of mankind. But here is the fundamental problem. It has this built-in conflict of interest. Its job is to both facilitate mining and to protect the environment from that mining. A lot of critics look at that and say, you just can't do both of those things well at the same time. So let's break down that 2-year rule we talked about because it's so important for understanding the crisis we're in right now. Okay, so first, Nauru triggered the 2-year countdown. Step 2, the ISA, which is deeply divided on this, failed to agree on the rules before the deadline. And now we're at step 3, this crazy loophole, which says the ISA now has to consider any application that comes in, even if there's no finished rulebook. It's basically created a backdoor for mining to start in a regulatory Wild West.
And all of this brings us to the final and maybe most important question. Is any of this actually necessary? Are there other ways for us to get the minerals we need for our green future? Let's take a look at the alternatives.
The good news is there are some really powerful alternatives. If we get serious about recycling, we could meet a huge chunk of our mineral needs right there. If we start designing products to last longer and be easy to repair, a real circular economy, that would slash the demand for new materials. And this is a big one. Battery technology is already changing. The move towards LFP batteries, which don't even use the nickel and cobalts found in these nodules, could totally change the game. It shows that deep-sea mining isn't something we have to do, it's a choice. And so we end up right about where we started, with this incredibly difficult question. In our rush to build a cleaner planet on land, are we about to sacrifice the health of our oceans to do it? It's a profound dilemma, with two very different environmental goals clashing head-on. And the choices we make right now in the next few years are going to decide the future of Earth's last